Last night, Stella and I had the great pleasure of interviewing a lovely man, Neville Isdell, who owns the EPIC Museum, the Irish Immigration Museum here in Dublin. And he worked with Coca-Cola his whole life for 43 years. And we asked him about the Immigration Museum and how he became so involved with Coca-Cola. So now you can listen to his interview from last night.
Dear Neville, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to speak to the Hellenic Community of Ireland. And it's a great honor. We are grateful for allowing us to run our festival in this magnificent and unique place in the CHQ, which is above the EPIC, the Irish Immigration Museum. I have to say, I was in love. I was taken by a pleasant surprise the first time I saw the whole building and the museum itself. The minute I finished, from the minute I entered the museum, I started crying. When I exited the museum, I was still crying. It's anybody can identify with this museum. To me, it's the World Museum of Emigration. It's not just for Irish people. So the first question I want to ask you is, how did you have the idea of building a museum of emigration? It's so unique. And any diaspora, I think, can identify with that museum.
Well, let me go back to the building as well, okay? Because I was looking for, an office building. It was when, after the crash, which of course was Greece and Ireland and Cyprus and Portugal, and the government was auctioning off a whole lot of assets from the banks. And I was just looking for a normal office building. And then someone took me for coffee in the Starbucks at CHQ and told me it was for sale. And I fell in love with that same building.
Yes.
And so it wasn't what I was looking for, but I'd never seen anything so beautiful. It'd been renovated by the government, but it's absolutely unique. So 200 years old. And there was an open bid, and I managed to win the bid. One of the reasons I managed to win the bid was because that ground area, those vaults below, where they used to store the wine, the whiskey and the wool and the like for shipment, no one saw any value in that. It was actually full of rubbish. It really was full of rubbish. So there was nearly, I would say 35% of the building that no one saw any value in. And I said, no, this is magnificent. These vaults are magnificent. And we were going around with torches, by the way. And so out of that, what do you do with it? Okay, so fine, you think you can do something. Well, I left Ireland when I was 10 years old. You'll hear from my accent that I don't sound Irish anymore. When I go to Ireland, it leaks back in again, all right? But I don't. I was brought up in Africa, and people would ask me about my accent. They listen to me and they say, "Where are you from?" And they would, they think it's Australian or what have you. And I say, "No, actually, I'm Irish." And the reaction I'd get is, "Oh, you're Irish. Oh, that's wonderful." And then they tell me an Irish story.
Yes.
And I realized that there was a uniqueness to that. If I'd said, well, actually, I won't be rude to them, but I'm English or I'm American or something like that. Oh, really? Yes, okay. But so there was the specialness of being Irish. Also, my father had headed up the Irish Society in Zambia at one time. And the Irish had a major impact on then Northern Rhodesia, but when it became independent, because a lot of the education happened through mission schools and convents, right? And also the legal profession was Irish, even though practicing English law, but was Irish, and they actually were the ones that represented the likes of the first president, Kenneth Counda, when he was arrested, etc. So, and the first Chief Justice, by the way, was an Irishman of Ireland. So out of that, and then as I went on my travels with Coca-Cola, because I've lived and worked in 11 countries and 5 continents, this continued to be reinforced about being Irish was different. And not just different in the normal sense, but there was a specialness about it.
Yes.
And then these are things that grow and build within you. And then when I went to the US, of course, you knew how many presidents came from the US, and obviously the Irish diaspora and the Scots-Irish coming. I also
we're expecting the Biden now soon.
Yes. Yeah. So, we're expecting that. Yeah, we want him to come to EPIC too.
Yes.
And so, there was that. And then, of course, I went and retired in Barbados, where there's a very strong history about the red legs, because the first indentured laborers were actually shipped out to work in the sugarcane fields in Barbados. So all these pieces come together. And what I thought was, when you talk about Irish history, it focuses on all the bad things. It focuses on civil war. It focuses on colonialism. It focuses on, the partition of Ireland, the famine. It's all the bad stuff. And yet, that bad stuff meant that the numbers that left the island of Ireland were significant. But these people made their mark around the world. So there was a story to be told which was very positive about what Ireland had achieved, or Irish people had achieved around the world. And when I did some research, I came to the conclusion that the Irish had basically punched above their weight, if you want to put it that way.
Yes.
In a global sense. And I said, well, how do we tell the story? And I'll leave it there. That can carry on from there. But that was the gestation of it. It was something that built up through my own history. And I thought, gee, this is something no one else has done and that I really want to do.
So it was really trying to make a case of a win-win case out of, because in one of the interviews that I've watched before, you were saying that it has been a lot of misery, it has been a lot of problems, but you have to get over all that, and you have to show all the positive outcome. So I think it's the creativity of this struggle that you saw, isn't it? It's what what immigrants created out there, and what created this friendly name for the Irish all over the world.
It's that, but it's also the fact that, and I believe this as an individual, and I try to live this, is that there is absolutely no question that, when you have difficulty, you also have opportunity.
Yes.
And I like to focus on opportunity. In fact, I was in a Zoom call this morning about malaria, and I started talking about the positives of COVID.
Yes.
Now, I know all the negatives. We all know that. But by the way, there are some changes that are positive changes to the world that are going to come from COVID. What are they? How can we exploit them? And exploit them, in a very positive way.
I think one of the questions I had planned to ask you is, what would you say? It would have been our third year that we would run the Greek Business and Arts Festival in the CHQ there above the EPIC. And what we do is we showcase projects and people that want to start their own business, and they have a business idea, or they want to turn a hobby into a business. And so we bring them together and we want to showcase that idea and that project, and that is related to Greece, Cyprus and Ireland. So we show that, we want to show that, and we want to encourage those people to do that. And that's why the Hellenic Community of Ireland is running that annual festival. So I thought it just brings it so at home to have the CHU and EPIC to be our host there, because the Greek diaspora meets the Irish diaspora, and they can these opportunities and creativity can flourish. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say to those people that have left their home country and they move to Ireland to find opportunities? I guess you've said it. In my mind, you've already said it. You have to just grasp the opportunities from, but what would you say? Sorry.
Well, first of all, we could have a debate of who taught who to dance. The Greeks taught the Irish, or the Irish taught the Greeks. All very similar.
Yes, yeah. So it is the world. Did you have that idea, Neville? Because I felt it didn't matter. Yes, you do show the different people that made it in the world, the different Irish people that made it out there, but it could be any nationality. I could identify, even I haven't made it, I'm not famous, but I could identify with anybody that has left their own country and they've gone to a different country and they made a life and something positive out of it. Wouldn't you call it? I call it the Museum of World Diaspora. I call it like that. Sorry, I do.
well, maybe I just have too narrow an Irish view, but I do agree. I do agree with you because people who leave their own country take a significant risk, and it's difficult. You have to readjust. But there are people who don't want to live within the narrow confines of the particular country that they're in. And normally it happens after some sort of disaster or some sort of downturn in the economy, etc. But it tends to be the people who want to achieve things that leave. And those are great stories to tell. But I also think that you've got to remember your ancestry as well. That not to leave that behind. So another piece of that puzzle was, what do I give back to the country that I came from as well?
Yes.
And by the way, I think of Ireland as an entity. You'll see within EPIC, we talk about Ireland. We talk about 4 provinces, yes. Basically. All right.
Yes.
With no division. What I call Rugby Ireland, because Ireland plays rugby as one, geographic entity, not as a political entity.
And GAA, all the GAA sports too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Neville, for that's all I had to ask. I think you've covered me completely. And again, thank you very much for hosting us, for letting the Hellenic Community of Ireland run the festival there. I believe there is nowhere else in the world that we could be more suitable, a more suitable place, not just because it's such a beautiful, extraordinary place, but it's just the diaspora, the Museum of Irish Diaspora. It's amazing. So I think Tina will has a lot of interesting questions for you too. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. Okay, thanks a lot.
Hello, Neville. How are you?
I'm good, Tina. I've relaxed now.
Good. Yeah, your heart has calmed down from all the rushing. Actually, Stella has asked you a lot of the questions, or you have answered in your answers a lot of the questions I had. But I'm just wondering, with you leaving Downpatrick at the age of 10 and moving to Northern Rhodesia, do you think that's what sort of started the wanderlust in you to travel the world? Did that play any part? I know you went to university in Cape Town, but what made you decide to then spread out? Was it joining Coca-Cola? Was that your first job when you left university? Because I know you were with them 43 years. That's a long time.
Well, it wasn't, but the others was serendipitous that I joined Coke. I had one where I worked for a short period of time until I got the job that I wanted, which is a training job with a retail clothing company in Johannesburg. And then I got an offer to relocate back to by then Zambia, not Northern Rhodesia, and started out there. And I never thought I was going to spend my life in one company. That wasn't a goal in and of itself. All right.
Yes.
But I think I've always been interested in geography. I've always been interested in history. I've always been interested in politics. Okay.
Yes.
So to all of that, there's a global dimension. I do remember a geography master that I had before I was 10 years of age. I remember playing around with maps of the world. So somewhere, it's within that. And then, of course, when you're 10, your parents are still explaining things to you. So why wouldn't you want to, understand why they want to see another part of the world? And I remember members of the family, saying, "What are you doing this to Neville? I mean, you're taking him out of stable society. You're going to the middle of Africa. What are you doing that for?" And he says, "Because he's going to enjoy the adventure." That's what my father said. I remember sitting in a corner hearing that. And of course I did. And, we were on the ship for 2 weeks. We stopped at Las Palmas. We stopped actually in Angola, Lobito Bay, stopped at Walvis Bay. Then we arrived in Cape Town with that beautiful mountain. And then 3.5 days by train, 2,000 miles through Africa up to then Northern Rhodesia. And I sat out, the trains were open between the carriages. And I would spend hours looking at Africa. And those are the imprints that I have, and it grew from there, basically. So my parents gave me the opportunity. I probably had it been fertilized a little bit earlier, and then it blossomed in terms of actually that trip in particular. And then I started actually with my parents, because we went on a trip to Latin America, discovering the world. And the rest was, in a way, serendipitous. I didn't, you couldn't say to Coca-Cola, "I want to go and live in 11 countries." They decided where you wanted to go. It was a bit like the Foreign Service in those days, right? Oh, who are we going to send to where? We'll send Isdell, and that's the way it just happened. But it did match my own love of travel and discovery.
Well, I can understand that because my father was a captain on super tankers, and my mother, like your parents, obviously, felt that travel was far more important than schooling. And we took off to, South America, the Middle East, everywhere on the tanker. And it is amazing, the education travel can give you. Those memories, I couldn't tell you what went on in school, but I can remember all those different countries and how important it is. And my daughter, the same thing. She's traveled all over the world when she was very young. When you retired, you became chairman of the World Wildlife Fund.
Well, again, that's Africa-centric because, the capital city was small, the country was large. We explored the country, became very much in touch with wildlife and the environment. And that seed was planted then. In terms of the specific, I'd been retired, I was brought back to chair the company. And one of the problems that we had was we had lawsuits in a number of countries about exploitation of water sources. And I got involved in this, and we put in a program where we needed a validator that we were actually giving back more water than we were using, because that was actually the fact. That's what was the fact. And we struck a deal with them whereby I undertook on behalf of the company that globally we would be water neutral by 2020. Okay. And the WWF, we could do these things and then we could come up with data and we could say, "Oh, look what we've done." No one's going to believe you. You're going to say, "Well, that's your self-interest, your data's wrong." So the validator and the one who monitored us was the World Wildlife Fund. That's when I first came in touch with them. They then and brought me to come and talk about that because it was the first major deal that had been done between a large company and an environmental NGO. And so it was sort of a banner type project. So I went and talked to their board and what have you. And the next thing, the moment I retired, I got this phone call and they said, "Would you come join the board?" Which I did. And then eventually they asked to chair the board, WWF. So, now I'm an environmentalist. That's what attached to my name now as to what I do.
Yes.
And the drivers of all these things are those sort of experiences, because what I was on for actually 3.5 hours today was a call on malaria elimination. I sit on 3 different boards, mostly in Southern Africa, for the elimination of malaria. And we had a Zoom conference with about 300 people this morning. Why malaria? Well, you know what? I had malaria in Zambia.
Oh, did you? Yes.
And then you find out about malaria, and you find out we know what causes it. We know how to eradicate it. We just don't put the energy and the money behind what's needed to do it. So then when you get into your self-actualization phase and you want to do things, you go and do something you care about. So I care about malaria because, I survived it. At the time that I started, there were 1 million people a year dying of it every year, and about 90% in Africa, where I was brought up. So I'm Africa-centric.
Yes.
So you see, there are all these different routes that then lead you later on to say, as I'm going to be involved in things and give back, where do I give back? Well, not to something that's esoteric that I don't have any feeling for or knowledge of, or anything. And that's my life of today. I'm involved in a lot of NGO boards.
Well, I'm fascinated in that because I had no idea that you could actually eradicate malaria. I thought it was something you just had to live with. And so that's very, very interesting. But, there's so much, as you say, there's a lot of money needs spending to totally eradicate it, obviously. And are the governments willing to spend that money?
They're willing to spend money, and they do, but they don't have enough money. So a lot of it is, again, multilateral aid. There's a lot comes from USAID. There's from the UK government. There are a number of programs. Because don't forget, Europe, it was endemic.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
so it's been eliminated from most of the world. Today, there's some pockets in South America. In fact, one guy was talking they've just declared that malaria is eliminated in El Salvador.
Really?
Another one in America, but Asia is more or less free of malaria today. 94% of today's malaria deaths happen in Africa.
That's amazing. Moving on, when you decided to return to Ireland, I know you said you wanted to buy an office block, but did you intend on moving back to live here, or you just wanted part of your roots back in Ireland?
It's very simple. I love Ireland. I don't like wet, rainy, cold weather.
I'm with you there. I live in Wicklow. It rains all the time. I'm up in the hills. It's green.
It's a green, but there's a reason. I was brought up in Africa. I was brought up in the sunshine. It may not match my complexion, but it's what I like.
Do you know my mother's sister, talking about schools, she got one of the first places in Liverpool University. My grandparents on my mother's side were Irish from Sligo and Adair, but they met and married in England. Of course, no work over here, but most of their children became teachers. But one of my aunts went out to get married to Nairobi, but fell in love with another fellow on the ship. That's a long story, and married him instead. But she ended up opening the Red Schoolhouse in Nakuru. and she lived her whole life out there, Anne Walsh. So yes, it's very interesting how people suddenly end up somewhere, you know, and we said, Africa. And she said, I love it. And she just loved it out there. She wouldn't leave. So she's buried out there anyway. But again, moving on. Yes.
No, another add-on story with regard to that. My parents obviously wanted me to go back to university in Ireland. Okay.
Yes.
My father wanted me to go to Trinity. My mother wanted me to go to Queen's. I had made up my mind that I was going to go to Cape Town University during the 4 days we spent in Cape Town. And I saw that university on the hill and I saw that mountain. And I said, I'm going to university there. So
really?
You know, these things get printed on you. And that's what I did. I went to Cape Town University.
That's I think you're so right to follow your dream. Parents who try and imprint their dream on their children, they've had their time. You've got to leave your children to do their own thing. And if they make mistakes, well, they learn by those mistakes. But anyway, EPIC won Europe's leading tourist attraction in 2019 and 2020. That must make you immensely proud. I mean, that is an incredible achievement considering, you know, for the whole of Europe, that is quite something.
Yeah, look, I am proud, but I'm also proud on the people who helped me do it.
Yes.
You know, I had the conception, but I needed people with the imagination and the ability to pull it together. And so there are a lot of people to be thankful for it. And the creativity that came around that was just amazing. You know, when I first had the idea, I didn't have the idea it was going to be fully interactive, but fully digital, the world's first digital museum. But as I explored, people came up with the idea, and then I would buy into the idea. To take credit that I had the whole thing in my mind and all the creativity around it, no, I had one rule though, that we're not going to do this unless it's world class.
Yes,
that's the rule,
and it is truly world class.
But if you ask any of the people who were involved, one of the rules that I gave is if it's not world class, it's not worth doing. And therefore we got the right people, and all the way down to the selection of the people that we focus on. I had an academic community, distinguished academics from Ireland, 7 of them, who did the research and chose the 320 people that we focus on. We got lots in reserve as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me, do you think every community should be honouring their own diaspora? And if so, do you have any advice for them as to how they should go about it?
Well, I think you've got to find a niche. The niche, of course, for Ireland is all of the terrible history and all of the sheer numbers that left. So there's an order of magnitude there that makes it sort of special and different. So you've got to find a piece of that. But I mean, I'm toying with not a museum, but I'm toying in Barbados now with a project in Barbados, which I'm developing at the moment. And part of that is, it's not going to be an epic, but it's trying to create some more culture around the experience in Barbados, which the government's talking about right now. It's sun and sand, and it's a beautiful island. Actually, they're wonderful people, but the culture has not been reflected upon enough. So there is some discussions going on around that. And you choose some sort of focal point. The focal point there that we're looking at, which is just adjacent to some old warehouses that I bought for renovation, is what's called a screw dock, which is sort of a reverse dry dock. And it's the only one left in the world today. And so resuscitating that and using that as a lever to then talk about, how Barbados, which was an unpopulated island up until 1652, was unpopulated in 1652. It had been populated prior, but going through with what's an interesting history. But it can't be told I don't think it can be told today strongly enough with just the diaspora. I think you have to talk about the evolution and the history of the island and marry those two together in the Barbadian context.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I see that the Irish Immigration Museum welcomed the then Greek president back in 2020. That must have been, you know, very, very interesting for him to I know, as I say, Stella is totally, I mean, it's number one on her list. She's completely blown away by it. But I'm just wondering, you have over 350 people of Irish heritage that you have in the museum. Is there any particular wish you have that any of those people were more well known to the Irish? Is there anyone in there that you think, you know, people don't know enough about these people? Any particular?
Well, I wouldn't say any, but well, yeah, I mean, they're all sort of revelations, particularly in the scientific arena. You know, probably a lot of people know about the Ferguson tractor and the development of the Ferguson tractor. But I think there are a number there. I can't bring one to mind right now, where when you go through there, you'll be surprised that in the scientific world, there are more than you actually think. Yeah, the ones that get noted, of course, are the political ones, the sporting ones, the movies and the like. It's when you get into the more intellectual areas that the surprises come, because you know you don't get in everyday language. You're not talking about them. You know?
No, that's true. That's very true. Now you've travelled so far to so many countries over the years. What's next, apart from your warehouses in Barbados? What is next for you? Have you any plans, or you're going to sort of you can envisage working on that going forward?
Oh no, I mean there are not many countries. I mean, I've visited 145 countries around the world. There are not too many left that I have on the list there, but there are places to go back to, places to go to. But we do go, my wife and I mean, we share, she's on the International Board of Advisory Board of BirdLife. She's also on the African Council of Nature Conservancy. I'm on Peace Parks Board, which is one in South African-based one, and of course WWF. So you know, we've got a confluence of interest there. So we do a lot of travel. We do a safari every year. We are due to be in Botswana and also in South Africa in September, COVID willing. And you know, there are a few other places that we want to go to and that we want to go back to. But I think at the age we're at now, it'll be Africa-centric, because we are Africa-centric, and a lot of it to do with environmental issues.
Yes, yes, yeah. How wonderful! I mean, that to me is a dream. I'm absolutely blown away by nature. I love it. I've got flocks of pheasants in my garden every day. I've got so many of them, and I just love them coming. I feed them all the time, and I've got like 10 now. 2 males, and they've got 8 females between them, and they're having fun. It's springtime.
And you have parrots in your house, Tina. You forget the parrots.
Yes, one of the parrots flew into my garden when I lived in Dubai, and I brought him home with me, Jasper. But before I let you go, Neville, because I know we've taken up a lot of your time and we really, really appreciate it, but I have to hit on a bit of the Greek thing. The Hellenic Bottling Company, how did you end up at the Hellenic Bottling Company?
Okay. I never tell a short story, my wife says, so
We've got all the time in the world. We're in lockdown.
I'll elongate it. I was at I was probably with Coke about 2-3 years in Zambia, and I was selected to go to a Coca-Cola convention in Nairobi. But of course, being very much a junior, I got to do some junior jobs. And one of the jobs was picking up the Nigerian bottler, name is Andrew David, and at the airport. Well, things grew over the years with regard to Andrew. They were the Coca-Cola bottlers in Nigeria, but also had a number of, it's the Leventus Group. You'll have heard of the Leventus Group.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So with the whole Leventus family. And, you know, I've been to some family weddings, and in fact, when Andrew eventually died, I was very, very close to him. I actually, in Athens, he had planned it, and I did a eulogy at his funeral. So, I mean, I a very close link with that family. And then fast forward, where I retired from Coke, floated a Coke bottling company in London, and Andrew and I started talking about a merger of the two. And we merged the two, it was floated on the London Stock Exchange. We moved that to Athens as Hellenic Bottling Company, Coca-Cola Hellenic. And Andrew was the chairman and I was the vice chairman and ran it. So, you know, that's a long Greek link in many ways. But yes. also in South Africa at the time, most of the sort of what you today would call convenience stores, okay, were actually run and owned by Greeks. And I have to say, going around to visit customers, and of course, having to drink a coffee every time, because, you know, that's de rigueur. Yeah. By lunchtime, you know, I was sailing a mile high on caffeine. Right? So I mean, there were these connections, and we've holidayed in Greece with friends who lived in Athens. We spent time with them. So, you know, it's been a good history.
Oh, well, that's fantastic, Neville. I want to thank you on behalf of, you know, the Greek Business and Arts Festival for taking the time to join us from Barbados. We really, really appreciate it. I know how busy you are.
No, it's great. I like talking about these things, and, you know, hopefully, you know, why do I do it? I do it because hopefully sometimes I can make some people that listen latch on to some of the earlier points about, you know, not mulling over a crisis, but looking for an opportunity. Yeah. That maybe I can have a positive influence in doing that.
Yes.
And if I can, I don't need to know about it, but it would. I think it does happen, and I just hope it happens this time.
I agree with you. I think everything happens for a reason. Never panic. It'll all pass. No matter how bad the thing, it'll pass in time. So I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So anyway, so thanks for your perseverance with me. I apologize again. But
not at all.
I hope it's been fun for you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. Bye.